Welcome to the podcast, everyone. I'm here with Sarah Angelo, co-founder of Daffodil, a DAF platform. Sarah, thank you for joining us today.
Eric, thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be part of this conversation and learning more about AAPA through it.
Excellent. Well, great to hear. Um, you know, as AAPA, as a Greater LA, but also US based nonprofit, we do a lot of fundraising. And one of the things that, your startup is doing, and I think a lot of nonprofits are interested in, are DAFs. Do you mind giving us a brief explanation of what they are and their overall purpose?
Absolutely. So, donor advised funds, abbreviated to DAFs, are very much a hot and trending topic in the world of nonprofits, philanthropy, giving, as well as personal finance. And anyone, especially in the US, who's concerned with that. So, a donor advised fund, even though it is now a trending topic, is a product that has been around for almost 100 years. A donor advised fund is basically a bank account where you fund it with dollars that will always be used for a charitable purpose. And any money that you put in a donor advised fund is not only always restricted for a charitable purpose, but it's immediately considered a tax deduction in the United States. So if you open a DAF today and you put $1,000 in that DAF, you take a $1,000 tax deduction immediately. But you distribute that $1,000 to nonprofits of your choice on the timing of your choice.
Hmm.
DAFs can be a great way to handle financial planning, especially when you have appreciated assets or some more complicated financial transactions. They can be a great legacy tool. They can be a fantastic way to plan your giving strategically or involve your whole family in a conversation about giving without the hassle of setting up a foundation or something that's more complicated. So today, there's over $250 billion held in donor advised funds in the US.
Wow, that is a lot of potential for giving and actually a lot of uh I guess an easier avenue to your point in terms of making sure like family giving versus a foundation. So I think you've highlighted a lot of the great benefits for individuals, right? We have the tax exemption, et cetera. What about for nonprofits? How do DAFs benefit them in some respects?
That's a great question, Eric. So, when a donor chooses to give to your nonprofit through a DAF, it's sending you a couple of signals. One signal could be that this is someone with a greater capacity to give. They've funded a DAF. They may have the ability to make a more significant gift to your organization. Another signal that it's telling your organization is that this is someone who is strategic about their giving. They've been thoughtful enough to open a DAF. They've been thoughtful enough to put some resources in it. They have a general plan that they want to be philanthropic. Seeing a contribution from a DAF when you are a nonprofit leader is a signal that the person, family, entity on the other side is someone who cares about giving. And that's something that can be part of your plan for cultivating and stewarding that entity.
Interesting. So I think one of the interesting things, and this gets into Daffodil, is how do nonprofits connect with these DAFs? And you kind of mentioned, the DAFs themselves are signaling. So maybe in your experience, how have nonprofits further cultivated those relationships with individuals with DAFs? I guess gave you two questions there, but apologies.
It's a great question, whether it's asked in two parts or one. So, something that's unique about DAFs that's a little bit frustrating for nonprofits, but is a bit of a benefit for the donors themselves. There's no central list of all the donor advised funds out there. So, if you are a nonprofit, there's a public list of all the nonprofits in the US. If you are a foundation, it's pretty easy to look up all the foundations in the country, foundations by giving area, by cause area, what they support. All of that is public information. But donor advised funds, it's not public information. I like to explain it as think of it as like bank accounts at a bank. You might know that a bank has millions of dollars under advisement, but you don't know how many accounts they have or who has those accounts. So that can be a frustration for nonprofits that are trying to tap into DAF dollars or steward those who have donor advised funds. So there are a couple ways that we suggest nonprofits can work with DAFs and work with people who like to give through this vehicle. The first is be really visible. Anyone who has a DAF, if they're going to be making distributions out of their fund, they need to know how to find you. So they need to know your organization's name. They should know, your EIN, that identification number that helps any donor make sure they're supporting the right organization. Those are some great ways to make sure that a DAF donor can find you. DAF donors tend to be really strategic. They've put money aside already for giving. They respond really well to fundraising appeals that are about impact, that are about outcomes, that are really showing what your organization is going to do with their philanthropic investment. They are much less likely to be motivated by, give today because it's Thursday, October 16th. They're a lot less motivated to give give $100 because we need it. They respond really well to impact and clear details about that. And the third thing is they respond really well to transparency, accountability, and really seeing that their donor advised fund, their dollars, their support is going towards something that's really going to make a difference. And that's what we're aiming to solve at Daffodil. When donors give through our platform, they get an ongoing impact digest and a dashboard that provides them with visibility into what their giving is really accomplishing. And we do that in a zero burden way that automatically syncs to the work that a nonprofit is doing. So, short answer to your question of how can nonprofits connect with DAF donors, be visible, focus on your impact, and hopefully, use Daffodil to let us help you.
Interesting. You hit on something that I've seen a lot in these times, which is the emphasis on, making sure you have visibility, transparency, and impact. Obviously, Daffodil can help with that, but I've seen a lot of nonprofits struggle a bit, right? Because maybe they don't necessarily have the technical foundations to properly document everything or record everything or do everything in an automated way, right? Um, what are some, I guess, tips that you would give to nonprofits as they enter this new age, especially when interacting with DAFs?
Yeah, great question. So, for organizations that are smaller, particularly grassroots organizations, those that are volunteer led, those that might not have the resources to invest in a lot of different programs and support systems, often they get overwhelmed by what is possible to do. And that leads to sort of a paralysis or an inertia. So, one thing I encourage those organizations to do is anything is better than nothing. So take a short video with your phone of a program in action. Tell a quick story and send that out as an email. Make some sort of content about the work that you're doing. Don't be silent about it. Even if you don't have a 20-page white paper showing the ongoing impact of your intervention or something really, really sophisticated, that's okay. Show up with something, show up as the trusted consultative partner on whatever it is your mission area is, and use that to build from. What I also think is a great thing to do, lean on the work that others have done. So, whatever your mission area is there a national leader in that where you can quote from research that they've done or use statistics that they've put together? Are there other sources that you can utilize for telling your story versus replicating the wheel? So when you start to build this information and use that to tell your own story, it becomes easier and easier to do and more lightweight. And you can train your volunteers and board members to help you with that as well.
Interesting. You kind of alluded to something that I wanted to ask you, right? Which is we're in an age of generative AI, right? Or technology that may be semi-autonomous in the future.
Mhm.
But I feel like around the world, there's still a large percentage of population that is still maybe, I don't want to say tech phobic, but maybe aren't as technologically savvy as they should be given with the state of affairs, right? And what would you say to nonprofits who maybe are interested in upskilling themselves in order to get, to that technical level? Um, and the reason I bring this question up is as it relates to providing that data, right? Or leveraging platforms like Daffodil in order to give DAFs this data. Any tips on that?
Oh, yes, this is a topic that I love, and I might have a hot take on it. So very often nonprofits are their own worst enemy in this area.
Mhm.
Um, like a quick anecdote. I was having coffee the other day with a friend who's an executive director. The organization is a couple million a year in annual budget. They're very substantial for what they do, even though they're small. And my friend was telling me that it takes them about 10 hours a week to do acknowledgement letters.
Oh, wow.
And I was pretty intrigued by that. And the acknowledgement letters here are tax receipts and personal thank you letters that they mail out to their donors every week. And this is not a large volume of donors. It's between 50 and 75 transactions a week. And they were spending up to 10 hours a week on this.
Mhm.
And when I learned about the process they were using for this, it was the exact same process that I was using in like 2005.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, why is that the case? Like, you just told me you use this product. This is your CRM. Like, they have automations for this. There's no reason why this product should take this task each week should take more than, I don't know, 45 minutes, maybe an hour. And that's counting if you still want to hand sign everything and write little love
Mhm.
notes on it. And they had never spent the time investing in the self-education of learning better, faster, easier ways to do this. Um, okay, fine. So I mentioned this is a great task that you can use AI for. Here are some other things that AI could be helpful for you. Well, they were kind of stuck because they were working on an AI policy, and their board was drafting their AI policy, and it needed to get a secondary board review at their next quarterly board meeting. So by the time this board policy on AI at the organization gets passed, it will be 9 months after the idea to have a policy was introduced at a board meeting. And I was just like, well, that means that someone at your organization has been using AI anyway for 9 months. Second of all, is anyone on your board an expert in AI? No. Okay. Is there any reason why you don't want to use an AI policy that has been created by any of the large national nonprofit councils, associations, groups that are experts in this? Like, why not use the policies they've created? Well, they're not unique to our mission area. We're a special snowflake and we need our. So you just think of how much work and how much time goes into something that should really take less than half an hour.
Mhm.
And really, in those ways, Eric, I think we get tripped up. And that's
Mhm.
the reason why the nonprofit sector gets left so far behind in adoption and in upskilling ourselves. There are so many free resources out there. There are free courses to learn about AI. There are great nonprofit organizations that exist to help their peers implement this stuff. And I don't know if it's fear, if it's having too much other work to do and not having the space to experiment. But whatever it is, I think it causes some real hurdles in adoption.
100%. I've seen that a lot, and I would plus one, given my background to everything that you've said. Um, actually, the same question actually applies to DAFs, right? Because
Mhm.
I think a lot of nonprofits, they've heard of it or they're starting to see it now. How do they kind of start participating? You've mentioned Daffodil, and and you mentioned the EIN and the transparency and just pushing things out and showing, hey, this is the impact we're showing. But for instance, how would a nonprofit sign up with either a DAF or at least have that visibility, whether it's Daffodil or another platform that can help in terms of amplifying a nonprofit's message?
Yeah, great question. So, for the first thing I would say is that a nonprofit should be having conversations with their supporters and proactively saying, "Hey, do you have a donor advised fund?" Very often, your major supporters have one, and they might not have thought to give from it. Sometimes people create these accounts and might only tap into them for some of their giving, but not all. But increasingly, more and more Americans are opening DAFs.
Mhm.
DAFs have grown over 400% in the last 15 years. And increasingly, DAFs have become a product that's accessible to every household. Previously, you wouldn't have considered open a donor advised fund unless you gave a minimum of $15,000, $20,000 or more to charity. Now, with the advent of products that are low fee or no requirements for an opening balance, a DAF can make sense for anyone who gives to charity in almost any amount. I've had a DAF for years. Even if you're giving less than $1,000 or less than $5,000 a year, it can be a great way to stay on top of your commitments to where you want to give, how you want to give, and even hold yourself accountable to the budgets and the goals that you want to hit for your personal philanthropy.
Mm.
So, step one, ask your donors, do you have a DAF? Let us know. Here's how you can use your DAF to support our organization. Second, if you are receiving funds from any donor advised fund sponsor, a donor advised fund sponsor is an entity that hosts the DAF. So that could be a commercial entity like Vanguard or Fidelity. That could be a community foundation. Daffodil has a charitable entity called Daffodil Charitable. That's the custodian of our DAF funds. Any of these funds, you really want to make sure that you are signed up for electronic donations with them. So you want to make sure that if there's any possible way to avoid getting paper checks, you've opted into that. So many of these platforms have a way to make sure you're using these payment rails for receiving support directly from their DAFs without physical checks. Make sure that you've signed up for those. And then the third thing here, one thing that really motivated us when we were starting Daffodil is we wanted to make it easy for DAF holders to find the causes and the impact that resonates with them. So what's different about Daffodil and the way we work with donors is we mobilize giving. We're really focused on helping getting those dollars out the door and allowing donors to proactively set cause areas, have automated distributions, and search by the impact they want to have, not just the name of an organization or an EIN. We can proactively help them find climate justice organizations in Florida or any specific cause that resonates with them, and then see the ongoing impact of their giving through their impact digests, their dashboards, and the storytelling we help to elevate.
Mm.
And we're free for nonprofits to share that information. So when a nonprofit opts into our network and that direct support, that information is automatically shared with donors at absolutely no cost to the nonprofit.
Interesting. Well, that's good to hear. So you're definitely amplifying the message of nonprofits to definitely a broader base.
That's our
One
goal.
thing,
Absolutely.
excellent. One thing I do wonder about from a nonprofit perspective, right? And this might be in the back of a lot of executive directors, board members' minds. Like, if I participate in let's say a DAF platform like Daffodil, that means I'm also competing against other nonprofits that may have similar causes. What do you say to that? I mean, I'm a
Hmm.
firm believer of rising tide floats all boats, right? But I also understand the concerns of maybe nonprofits that maybe are competing against not only similar nonprofits with similar causes, but also causes that are adjacent, or that might be more um, conditional, right? I'm thinking of the LA wildfires as an example.
Of course, that's a great example. I think there's a scarcity mindset that's really pervasive in the nonprofit sector. And it's a mindset that is apparent at organizations that are volunteer run. And it's a mindset that is still prevalent at organizations that are $100 million a year in budget and growing. And it's this idea that I think it was Voulet who called it the nonprofit Hunger Games. And I always kind of love that because it's this idea that we're all in competition with each other. And in some ways, that's absolutely true. There's a finite amount of dollars in donor advised funds, and they can't go out to everyone. But I'd push back on that and saying, when we're speaking about donor advised funds, there's $250 billion and growing in these restricted assets. Um, there's a big enough pie for organizations to be loud and proud about the work that they do and being deserving of support, the impact they have, their capacity for growth. And one organization's success is not to the detriment of another organization's. A dollar for my organization is not a dollar lost for yours. So I absolutely agree with your perspective on the rising tide lifting all the ships.
Excellent. I think, as we think about it, right, and hopefully as we get individuals away from that scarcity mindset, considering, the rise of DAFs and the amount that is available, how does it tie into some of the more traditional methods, right? You've already identified that maybe DAF owners are a bit more strategic in their giving, right? But I know a lot of nonprofits still rely on Give in May as an example, or year-end appeals. How do you see that as part of the overall fundraising effort with regards to DAFs and existing methods or campaigns?
Well, one thing that's great about donor advised funds and DAF donors is that they're not motivated by an end of the year cutoff. So they actually give regularly throughout the year. There's been some terrific research published by the DAF Research Collaborative that shows this, that even though there's a little bit of a spike in the end of the year, which is when many nonprofits do their solicitation, but distributions out of DAFs happen throughout the year. So I think that's a fantastic piece of information for organizations to have as they think about their traditional fundraising methods. Another thing to consider, include notes about DAFs and how to support out of a DAF in your regular fundraising materials. If you're doing a direct mail campaign, include a shout out about DAFs. Put your EIN on that postcard or on that letter that you're sending out. There's no reason that it needs to be only a restricted way of talking about fundraising, only a restricted way of talking about a source of support. Including DAFs can be part of Giving Tuesday or part of your year-end campaign, anywhere that you're regularly building support and asking for resources for your organization. You can mention DAFs or mention how to support an organization through a DAF through that.
Interesting. Well, I think we're at the end of our conversation. It's very fascinating. We've gone from DAFs to how nonprofits can participate, and a little bit on generative AI. Maybe that's another podcast for a future time.
Next conversation.
Exactly, 100%. But I always usually leave the last word to our guest speakers. So, Sarah, any other words of advice or wisdom that you want to relay to listeners of this podcast, particularly in the nonprofit space?
I would. And one thing I would love to double click on here is that DAFs have kind of a bad reputation in our space. There is this pervasive language that DAF holders are wealth hoarders, that this is money that's being gate kept from organizations, that because there are no laws encouraging DAFs to pay out, the money just sits there. And I think it's really exciting to look at the data and see that that's not the story that we see. The majority of DAF dollars move much more quickly than things like foundation. 25% of DAF assets seem to pay out each year. And the growth of DAFs show that there's a lot of interest in being philanthropic and how to support giving in more fluid and flexible ways. So, any nonprofits out there, I hope you'll consider claiming your profile on Daffodil. We'd love to have you on our network. And I really appreciate the chance to be here and talk all things DAF with you, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and look forward to having you again sometime when maybe we'll talk about Gen AI.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.